Great. Thank you, Morgan. Welcome everyone to Senate Education.
Feedback, welcome, everyone, to Senate Education, period. Clear, Mac.
Just a little technical difficulty. How's that? Good. Okay. Want to begin with a very warm welcome to Secretary Zoe Saunders. We're pleased to have you with us this afternoon. As you know, this is an opportunity for the Senate Education Committee to consider your appointment as Vermont's Secretary of Education. It also serves an opportunity for our legislative colleagues and Vermonters across the state to get to know you better, as well as an opportunity for you to get to know us. We've received a lot of emails about process, so let me just say a few words. Unlike other cabinet level positions where the governor makes appointments himself, the State Board of Education oversees the search process for the Secretary of Education. State Board is an 11-member citizen board appointed by the governor, each serving a term of 6 years and shall not be eligible for reappointment for successive terms, just to give people some background about that group. So this search process was initiated when the State Board received a letter from Governor Scott to the State Board of Education on June 26, 2023. And the letter is in senators' folders and available online. In fact, all the testimony, if anybody's interested, is completely available online. Following receipt of this, 3 members of the State Board of Education, Jennifer Samuelson, Lyle Jepson, and Jenna O'Farrell, served on the search committee for the new Secretary of Education. The search committee began its process by having opportunities for public comment at each of their 11 committee meetings. And they also held a public hearing for members of the public who expressed their thoughts and opinions on the desired qualities and attributes of the next Secretary of Education. The State Board synthesized the information they learned from all public comment received, integrating it with the requirements set forth in statute, as well as the educational priorities outlined in Governor Scott's July 26, 2023 letter launching the search for the Secretary of Education. Collaborating with the Offices of Human Resources and the Office of Racial Equity, they crafted a job description to advertise the opening. On receipt of 19 applicants, more applicants, I should mention, we learned on Friday, for this round than either of the past 2 searches received. The State Board reviewed applications, interviewed candidates, and forwarded 3 names to the governor, which the governor chose Secretary Saunders. Now up to us, the Senate Education Committee, to interview Secretary Saunders to make a recommendation to the full Senate. If confirmed by the full Senate, Secretary Saunders will be up for reappointment and reconfirmation this coming February 2025. Secretary Saunders had one final comment that really for you. I think we all know, and you certainly know, that your nomination has garnered a tremendous amount of interest. I would be remiss if I were not to say that we come to this hearing at a moment in our nation's history where divisiveness is at an all-time high and our democracy is under threat. And democracy is about process, and this hearing is an essential part of that process. Dismissing someone prior to such a process is not only disconcerting to me, it is also disconcerting to many Vermonters. So I want to assure you that we are here to provide you with a fair, respectful, thoughtful, comprehensive hearing this afternoon. So with that, we'll go around the room, introduce ourselves, and turn it over to you. Senator Williams.
Senator Jerry Williams, representing Rutland County from Pulteney.
Dave Weeks from Proctor, representing Rutland County.
Brian Campion, Bennington County.
Martina Rock-Ewick. I live in Burlington and represent Chittenden Central, which is Winooski, Burlington, Essex, and Colchester.
Hi, Nader Hashim from Wyndham County.
So your introductory comments, any thoughts you may have, I'm sure they're better than what I just put out in terms of interest. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Campion and Education Committee members for having me here today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss my professional background and how my skills will help to elevate public school and public education in the state of Vermont. Additionally, I'm excited to share with you my motivation for being your next Secretary of Education, and how my first week on the job has strengthened my dedication to fulfilling this crucial goal. My passion for education has been shaped by my rural roots and family deeply ingrained in the values of collective advocacy and engagement. This upbringing has profoundly shaped my view of education as a means of fostering equity, inclusion, and opportunities for all students. Professionally, I chose a career that afforded me a broad view of education and an understanding of the many factors that contribute to student success. Over nearly 2 decades of education leadership, I have focused on developing a shared vision for a more just and inclusive future, where all students have access to a great public school. A pivotal moment in my educational journey occurred while I was an undergraduate student at Harvard University. During my college years, I tutored in an after-school and summer program in a Boston neighborhood plagued by historic rates of gun violence. Witnessing the trauma these children brought to school highlighted for me the critical importance of context in educational programming. Meeting with parents and education activists underscored the vital role of community engagement in developing educational opportunities that are tailored to meet the needs of the whole child. This experience led me to begin my professional career in the nonprofit sector, where I provided wraparound support to children with developmental delays, chronic health conditions, and HIV/AIDS. I gained valuable insights into the broader health and social emotional needs that students bring to the classroom. Motivated by these experiences, I pursued a Master of Education degree at Vanderbilt University's Peabody School of Education to develop expertise in creating comprehensive systems of support spanning from cradle to career. In graduate school, I spearheaded community engagement efforts by walking door to door in the largest public housing project in Nashville, Tennessee, to capture residents' educational priorities. With the community goals in hand, I worked to align partner resources to increase educational services and family support. My efforts helped secure a Promise Neighborhood grant, which was a signature education initiative under the Obama administration. Here's what I learned from this experience. We must work together, all of us, fully, to meet the needs of students so that they can thrive. I was then hired at Charter Schools USA to drive academic performance for 70,000 students across 7 states and ensure a great public school for every child, regardless of family income and where they lived. My tenure at Charter Schools USA gave me a national perspective on public education and honed my skills in driving school performance improvement. Working closely with principals and teachers in high poverty, high minority communities, I facilitated school improvement planning and developed tools and systems to sustain performance year over year. I also gained broad strategic and operational experience in grants management, accreditation, budgeting, program adoption, and board reporting. One of my proudest achievements was that every child received a personalized learning plan that supported their academic success from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Our number of A and B schools doubled within 2 years, and achievement scores increased an average of 41%. I led this work across multiple states, involving many state superintendents, principals, curriculum specialists, and teachers, and had to adhere to different laws, state laws, and requirements. This experience is very relevant to the ethos of local control in the state of Vermont. Subsequently, I was hired as the first Chief Education Officer for the city of Fort Lauderdale in Florida. In this role, I focused on supporting the most underserved schools within one of the nation's largest public school districts. I focused on, and this role enabled me to engage the community. And in doing that, I analyzed the data and advocated for changes that resulted in millions of dollars of improvements to public school facilities and new extended learning programs. Additionally, I worked to address critical job shortages by launching new technical training programs. I developed an aviation program to fill critical mechanic vacancies and a public works program to develop a talent pipeline to support climate resiliency. Under my leadership, the city earned several awards, including from Broward County Public Schools, the National League of Cities, and the U.S. Department of Labor under the Biden administration. Thereafter, I joined Broward County Public Schools, the sixth largest school district in the country, serving over 200,000 students. As the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, I developed a participatory approach to redefine district operations with the goal of better meeting the needs of students. As the district faced significant under-enrollment, part of my job was to develop strategies to increase demand in public schools. I'm here because I believe in the power of public education. As a mom of two school-age children who will be entering Vermont public school, I take the responsibility of leading the Agency of Education very seriously. My decision to move to Vermont is also deeply personal because it allows me to be closer to family. I'm excited for my children to live near their aunts, uncles, and cousins who already live here in Vermont, and for them to grow up in such a wonderful place. I believe my role as a Secretary of Education is to listen, learn, and lead the state to achieve our collective goals. I applied for the job because I want to support Vermont's efforts to create a continuum where early childhood services seamlessly lead to kindergarten readiness and a smooth transition to K-12. And K-12 is aligned with higher education, training, and career opportunities. Research shows having this type of system is a driver of social mobility and economic prosperity, not to mention the positive impact on social determinants of health and prevention. I've devoted my life to promoting integrated educational services from early childhood to workforce training. The key skill that I bring is the ability to break down silos, to create a continuum of education and wraparound supports targeting students' needs. Over the past week, I've had the great privilege of traveling across the state to familiarize myself with the education landscape. These visits are helping me to develop a listen and learn tour, which will hopefully promote broad-based engagement. I've also met with all superintendents, the State Board of Education, chambers of commerce, and the community. Additionally, I've enjoyed meeting with agency staff who are enthusiastic about their work and excited to support the future of education in Vermont. I've heard a few key themes in my first week on the job that I'd like to share with you. First, there seems to be a great interest in developing a unifying vision for the future of education in Vermont. This has been an overarching theme, touching on issues of education finance, education quality, enrollment, facilities, and workforce development. Second, there are questions about how we can balance Vermont's ethos and motto of unity and freedom as we strive to achieve shared educational goals while celebrating local control and customization. Third, the issue of mental health has emerged as we grapple with ways to meet students' expanding needs. Finally, all these conversations require us to think strategically about how to finance our education system, ensuring that we are providing equitable learning opportunities for every student. Spending time in the field has also reaffirmed my belief in the strength of Vermont's education system. I am proud of our emphasis on personalized learning, community engagement, and inclusionary practices. I had the opportunity to meet with students and was extraordinarily impressed by the students' ability to think analytically about very complex issues, and also their sincere desire to make a difference in their communities. I was also impressed by teachers' passion for their students and enjoyed seeing how they engage their students meaningfully in their content. Additionally, from principals and superintendents, I felt their genuine desire and relentless effort to give our students more educational opportunities. I understand that this is a challenging time and know that the work ahead of me will not be easy. I recognize that educators have been asked to do more and more over the past 5 years while navigating challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, and now face difficult budget decisions that I know must be incredibly stressful and emotionally draining to consider. However, I trust that together we will build upon the strengths of our community and each other. I believe in public education and I believe in Vermont. I'm excited for this opportunity and look forward to engaging in deeper conversations about how we can build an even brighter future for Vermont students.
Thank you very much. And I'll start with the question, and then open it up to the committee. I know senators, sure have a number of different questions. So one of the things I'm interested in knowing, Secretary Saunders, is you talked about this a little bit, but your devotion to public education. If we were to turn to someone and say, here are some examples of how Secretary Saunders has demonstrated historically that devotion to public education, what might be a couple of things that we might?
I've spent nearly 2 decades promoting public education. I think I want to clarify too that in every state that I've worked, charter schools are public schools. And so I was able to support in really focusing on driving school performance improvement and working closely with principals and teachers and analyzing the data and building systems in place to support student success. I've also had experience in public education, building strategic partnerships that have helped to enrich the programmatic opportunities and really be able to leverage the collective resources to better serve students. Additionally, in public education, I've worked to close the service gaps and I've had the opportunity to build extended learning opportunities both after school and summer to provide those additional time and intensive support for those students that are struggling.
Just a follow-up, charter schools, the term is used all the time. Magnet schools, charter schools. What can you just tell us? I think charter school means different things depending on where you are. Could you just say something about the charter schools in particular that you've worked in?
Sure. And I also want to mention that I'm not interested in bringing charter school legislation to the state of Vermont. And I know that the governor has also come on the record and indicated that as well. In every state that I've worked in, charter schools are public schools, and they are defined as public schools in state statute. And what that means is the students that are enrolled in those schools are required to take the same state assessment. Teachers are required to have the same evaluation standards. What is different is the governance structure and the enrollment process. So instead of the enrollment being by the geographic boundary in which a student lives, it's based on a lottery system, similar to a magnet school, which I know we have one in Burlington. In terms of the governance structure, yes. In terms of the governance structure, the board has, the charter is approved by the authorizer, which is either the school district or the state, and then has another layer of a school board that oversees the accountability to the agreed upon performance metrics. That board is able to contract with an education management company to support day-to-day operations. And they are required to go before their authorizer to be able to show their results. And if they are not meeting the performance standards, they are subject to action that may include closure.
Thank you. Committee. Senator Sheaf.
Hi, thank you for coming. And so, I'm curious about your thoughts on public schools versus private schools, maybe versus regular, but we have a complicated ecosystem in our state, and one of the more controversial conversations that we have has to do about the relationship between public schools and private schools and towns and where they're sending their students. And so I was wondering if you could shed some more light on just your thoughts on privatization of schools and what you see in the future regarding that ecosystem.
Thanks for the question. Vermont's very unique in being a tuitioning state. So I have not worked in a state that does have this particular education ecosystem established, and it's so something I am learning. My understanding is that this interdependence really emerged as a way to ensure that every child had access to a public school option. And in some portions of our state, particularly in the Northeast Kingdom and some areas of the southern parts of Vermont, we do not have a public school option in a town, in which case students would be able to have access to an independent school. So in having conversations, it does seem to be that there is an interdependent relationship with our independent schools.
And so do you have any thoughts on how that may grow or change in any ways? Or is that an area that you're planning to just focus on learning more before policies or proposed legislation?
Yeah, so I think what I have seen is the legislature really has passed a moratorium on opening new independent schools. I also know that there has been some really significant and important work around ensuring that there is no discriminatory practices around enrollment, particularly if there is a parochial nature to the independent school. And so I do think those are two things that the state has been very proactive and supporting to make sure that where these independent schools are part of the ecosystem, that they are operating and really adhering to the values of Vermont and providing the educational quality that's equivalent to public schools. I think for my question, as I look at the education ecosystem, is the questions around why parents and students are choosing schools, right? And I think that's a healthy conversation to have, and one that I've had in many areas that I've been in, to really help to promote the great programs that are going on in schools, and to really strengthen the interest and the awareness of those programs. I think is really my first priority of really being able to strengthen and build up our public schools.
Thank you.
The follow-up, Senator Sheen? No. Okay, Senator Hewitt.
Mine is a bit of a follow-up to Senator Sheen's question. So, in terms of our landscape here in Vermont, do you think that private schools that receive public dollars should have to follow the same rules that apply to public schools? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we have accountability to public dollars. And so my understanding is that the students that do attend these schools are required to also participate in the state assessments. And I think that's important to ensure that there's a high quality of educational delivery.
Questions, please, Senator Wicks. Sorry, Senator Field, do you have a follow-up to that?
Maybe later.
Okay. Senator Wicks.
Thank you. Again, welcome. In your position as the Vice President of Strategy at Charter Schools USA, your company educated almost as many students as there are in all of Vermont. This background makes our constituents nervous. I'm wondering, what did you learn there? How does it frame your view of Vermont's public education system?
May I ask a follow-up question just so I can answer the question appropriately? But what about that makes people nervous?
Charter school.
Oh, not the size.
That's all, just the concept.
Not the size, okay.
Yeah, that's correct, not the
Yes.
size.
So really, I think the focus is on what I've learned in that experience, that I think the skills that are transferable to this role in the state of Vermont. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I oversaw schools across 7 states. And so, in my position, I was trying to ensure that every school had high quality and consistent outcomes. And we had to make sure we were mindful of the different state accountability frameworks, different state policies, state requirements. And so what that required was really being able to establish those quality standards while allowing for that local control, which I think is very relevant to the situation in Vermont, where our towns are very involved in really advocating and influencing decisions on the ground. So I have experience in being able to establish those core initiatives that really help to elevate the standard while allowing for customization. So I actually think that's a real strength that I bring, that I've had that experience working in a very complex system in a distributed environment that has many parallels to how the state of Vermont is structured in terms of their geography and local control. Also was able to work very closely with our schools and ensuring that academic needs were driving budget decisions and re-engineered the budgeting priorities process to ensure that occurred. I think that's very relevant also as we're having conversations around how the sustainability of our system moving forward and ensuring that we're promoting equitable market opportunities.
Thank you.
Please, Senator Williams.
So Vermont is a very diverse area. got a lot of nooks and crannies. We had problems that are typical in Vermont, or lines of communication. Getting there, can't get there from here is a good saying, you're gonna hear it. So it's gonna take some special kind of leader to pull it all together. Can you explain your particular style of leadership you think is gonna help you in Vermont?
Thank you for that question. And practically speaking, I've been told to be able to print out my map list when we go places, so I can get to the right place at all
Don't
times.
use Google Maps.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question around my leadership style. So I've used StrengthsFinder with teams, and I find that to be a helpful tool and what I should identify what are the naturally occurring talents that you have to help you to lead a team, and then how you bring in people who have other talents to complement that. And so I think overall that's my style of building a team where we are really leveraging each other's strengths and working in a complementary way. But when you look at my strengths, my first is vision. And that's really, establishing a very long-term vision around what we all want to achieve. And I find that bringing that into team meetings and conversations is critically important to keep people focused on what's important and also to keep them motivated around what we need to do for our students. My second strength is strategic. So being able to take that vision and think tactically around how to implement strategies in a way that's going to help us all work together to achieve that vision. A third strength of my leadership style is I'm a learner. So that's going to be particularly important for me as I take on this new role in a new state and getting well versed on the policies and intricacies of your state system. And another strength I have is an achiever strength. And so I think that's also very important because what it helps me to do is to see the long-term vision, but then establish those strategies that are going to help us to achieve some short-term success while we're planning for that longer-term vision 10 plus years down the road. So I bring those strengths as I build team, and I work intentionally to identify team member strengths so that we can bring them on board to complement and strengthen our overall work together.
Just a follow up.
Please.
So I've been here for 2 years in the education committee, kind of looking from the outside in at the Agency of Education. And what I see is a very diverse, talented group of people. And they need some glue to bring them all together. Do you have a focus on where you're going to start?
So thank you for that question. So as part of my onboarding, I asked every division manager to provide me with some transition documents. And within that, I asked them to share what their previous accomplishments were, what challenges they see ahead, to outline for me where are some of the compliance requirements that are upcoming that we need to make sure we meet the mark on, and also what type of field support are we currently providing. So right now, by the end of next week, I'll have the opportunity to meet with every division team, and what we're doing is really outlining those immediate priorities so that I can create a comprehensive schedule and calendar of the major milestones that we need to be tracking. Building into that, I will be structuring in some really strategy and visioning sessions so we can think about how to build on the work that we're doing while helping to propel planning for the future vision of education.
So I had a question about collaboration and wondering again, sort of question about some evidence. If I were to point to public school sort of experience and commitment. Tell me a little bit about proven commitment to collaboration with other groups, organizations, nonprofits, school personnel. And some specific examples.
Sure. Collaboration has been constant in my work. And I have found that by bringing people around the table, we can do better work together and we get the best ideas around to move things forward. I'll share a couple of specific examples. So when I was at the city of Fort Lauderdale, we were addressing as people across the country the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we were seeing significant learning loss. Just within our city, we had 7,000 students who were not meeting adequate annual progress. I was able to work with our commission in drawing down $1.5 million of CARES Act funding to develop a summer enrichment program. What I did with that is making sure that we were developing our program intentionally in a way that could serve more students and invested dollars where they were needed most. So I brought together Broward County Public Schools, Children's Services Council, which is another government entity that provides funding to our nonprofits and our nonprofit organizations. And I asked each of them as part of that first session, what summer programming are you able to provide with the funding that you have? And then what we were able to do was identify where there were gaps. And that's where I was able to locate the funding that we had from the city of Fort Lauderdale to make sure that we were addressing the needs of students who otherwise would not have been met. Some considerations that I brought into that process was thinking about the needs, particularly of low-income students and working families. Some programs had funding to only offer a half-day program, and that wasn't going to work for many of our families. So what we ended up doing was we developed a very complex program where we had some program dollars that were allocated for providing that aftercare support for the school districts that offered a half-day program. So now those students that really needed the most highest level of academic intervention could have a full-day program, and those parents that were working could take advantage of that. Then we were able to take our Parks and Recreation program that served thousands of students and be able to build in academic enrichment programming for those students. And subsequently also partner with some other nonprofits that did not have a contract to offer services in some areas of our city that really needed it. And so that just is an example of when I brought people around the table, we were very intentional around understanding how we could leverage the dollars in a way that was not duplicative, but really built upon the strengths of the partner organizations and funnel dollars in a way that was going to be most impactful for students.
No, please go ahead.
Okay.
Keep going.
So that's one example.
Yeah.
Another example, when I was driving school improvement planning for across multiple states, we were working with our principals and classroom teachers. And the process of planning and data collection and analyzing can be quite onerous and quite time consuming. And so as part of that planning process, I was able to sit with our teams and identify what some of the challenges were and being able to do that in a more efficient way. So what we did was actually worked in collaboration to develop a school improvement planning platform that provided integrated goal setting from the student's personalized learning plan to the teacher's classroom goals to the student goals and all the way up to the regional goals. And that was quite helpful in being able to create that alignment. But the real additional value of that was a way for us to be able to capture what was working well across our system so that we could share those best practices to support teachers in classrooms in different states and different districts and supporting their learning outcomes. And that was a very collaborative effort that involved our principals, our classroom teachers, multiple departments, including IT and education and innovation and data reporting to bring that all together. And then part of the alignment that we created with that as part of the collaboration was to ensure that now that data reporting helped to provide transparency and accountability to our school boards. And so they were part of the collaboration as well in terms of identifying the data points that they thought would be important for them to see on a regular basis in terms of ensuring their duties.
So I do have a follow-up, and that's regarding, you referenced it a little bit, working with families and students in poverty. I don't really know the Fort Lauderdale community at all. So could you just say a little bit about those experiences and any work you've done? Maybe elaborate on the population, Fort Lauderdale, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just to give me a clear picture of.
Sure. So the city of Fort Lauderdale is comprised of 180,000 residents, and it's very divided in terms of areas of very concentrated affluence and wealth and areas of concentrated poverty that largely are aligned to the patterns of redlining and unfortunately very correlated with race as well. And we have some of the areas of our city were experiencing the highest poverty rates in the entire state. And so my work in coming to the city was ensuring that we were providing the support and advocating for resources for those schools and those communities and working in coordination with the neighborhood associations and also with the local community leaders in those areas, again, to identify what are their priorities for education. I was struck by an early conversation I had was a community activist where I naively said, what are we going to do to get people more involved? And the response was, we are involved and no one's listening. And that really struck a chord with me and showed me the importance of the role of government and helping to amplify the voice of the community. And even if they're not able to show up at commission meetings or public forums because they're working multiple jobs, that we're being intentional about championing those improvements that are going to be most important to the communities and finding ways to connect with those communities and meeting with them where they are and when they're available to share that information about what is most important to them. And so in that work, I really brought the lens of equity to everything I did as the Chief Education Officer at the City of Fort Lauderdale. We had $12 million in Parks Bond funding that we were able to invest in improving school playgrounds. And I worked intentionally to develop an equity index so that we actually invested more dollars in those schools in those areas that had higher need. I also advocated strongly for facility improvements in some of our historic and legacy schools that had been underserved and was successful in working with the community and looking at the data and being able to substantiate the need to get unanimous approval from the school board to invest additional $1 million in improvements in those areas of our state. So it's certainly the North Star that I have in my work. And outside of the city of Fort Lauderdale, I've worked in other communities. I mentioned my work in Nashville, Tennessee, where I worked with the largest public housing community in the city, worked in inner city Chicago and downtown Miami and rural Louisiana. I've worked in a lot of different places that are grappling with the challenges that come with poverty. I think in every instance is around how do we make sure that we're providing those extended systems of support and working with community and partners to be able to create that those services for children and families.
Thank you. Sarah, go.
Yeah, I have two follow-ups and then a brand new question.
Okay.
First follow-up, just regarding what you've said about the $1.5 million in the drawdown money from COVID. So curious about that summer enrichment program. Did it continue after the money dried up? The
I'm
federal
really
money?
proud of that. Yes.
Okay.
So for 3 years, we were able to implement that program and we saw really great success. On average, students in the program mastered 2 or 3 more skills in reading and math during the summer months. And so because we were successful, we were actually able to apply for appropriation from the state of Florida. And we're awarded an additional $700,000 to continue the program and, more importantly, expand it so that it could provide after school as well, so that we actually had a continuum of educational support for our students. And we added in additional programming related to workforce training and navigating college and career opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Back to, I want to make sure I got an answer on using private schools that receive public dollars should have to follow the same rules that apply to public schools. Was it a yes or a no on that answer?
So my answer was around the accountability piece is very important. So I think accountability, to the educational outcomes is absolutely important as we look at public dollars and sharing those.
Okay, so outcomes are more important than necessarily whether or not they follow the same rules. The outcomes are what drive your decision.
Yeah, so that probably is a more nuanced question than I'm able to answer at this moment because I have not yet had an opportunity to do that side-by-side comparison. I think that you're referencing where I think what you're alluding to is that there may be specific rules. What I do know is that at the State Board of Education meeting that I attended last week, they were reviewing both the 2000 and the 2200 series and ensuring that we did do a lineup of definitely ensuring that there was equity and quality of both of our standards. So that's what I'm able to answer at this time, but certainly based on your question, I would imagine there'll be further research.
Okay, great. And then I have another follow-up.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. Another one that will come later. I'm wondering, so I have over 300 emails from concerned constituents from all over the state who are extremely worried that you not only don't have experience as a classroom teacher, but you also lack experience as a superintendent or a principal. Can you point to specific experience you have implementing state and or federal policy in the school district?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I want to acknowledge that. And so, I know previous secretaries of education have taken more of a traditional path of progressing from a teacher to a principal to superintendent. And I think that pathway is very valuable, and I think it provides important insights. My path that I chose is different. I think gives me a very broad view of education, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a very diverse understanding of the factors that contribute to student success. But in terms of my work in public schools and doing some of what you said, I was responsible for managing $25 million in grants and federal and competitive grants, both on the pre and post award side. It's responsible for ensuring accountability to the performance metrics. I mentioned my work around school improvement planning, but also if there was any engagement we had to do at the state level, I was involved in that as well to make sure that we were complying with those requirements. I have experience in developing standard operating procedures to ensure that operationally we have our alignment around how we're doing our work, both on the financial side as well. I have experience developing budgeting cycles. I mentioned earlier that I was able to quickly identify that we were out of step in terms of how we did planning and budgeting, so that what occurred was by the time we were doing planning, the budget had been set, and I was able to re-engineer that process to make sure that the academic needs are driving the budgeting decisions for schools. So I think those are very applicable examples. I worked closely in developing curriculum around social emotional learning and working with our schools and implementing that. And I found what's been really important in that effort is to identify early champions in helping to craft the approach. And when we're doing the pilot, to get input from the classroom teachers about what's working and what's not working. So I have those experiences that I think are very relevant and applicable and aligned to the questions you're asking.
Okay, yeah, I would just posit that managing grants is quite different from implementing state and federal policy. And, Title I, Title IX, IDEA, have you implemented any of those federal policies at state levels?
No, I have not worked at a state level before.
It's not a shame.
Thank you. So one form of collaboration that happens between at least this committee and the AOE is, we often get policy recommendations or legislative suggestions for things that we can work on. And I don't want to make assumptions, but is that something that you would be willing to continue into the future?
Yes. I think the Agency of Education takes a leadership role in working with the General Assembly to provide guidance on policy decisions. I see our role as being multifaceted, and analyzing the data to be able to give the General Assembly important information to direct your decision making, and also to researching policy that could be informative to the discussions that you're having around the applicability in our state. So I absolutely see that the agency plays a really important role in that, and I'm excited to take part in that.
Thank you. And just a follow up to that. So let's fast forward and, let's say it's January of next year, we're in the next legislative session. Based on what you've learned so far, do you have any thoughts on just a couple of potential policy or legislative suggestions that you would want to bring to this committee, or I don't have to mention the House committee, or to this committee?
Thank you for that. The question that I've been asking everyone I meet with is, a year from now, what do you hope we'll be celebrating together? And that's really how I was able to compile the themes that I shared with you in my opening remarks. One thing that has been really consistent is people want to see a year from now that we've spent the time working together collaboratively to have difficult conversations, analyzing the data, coming up with a unifying vision. And I think that unifying vision is encompassing of a number of different policies that you're currently exploring and will explore related to education finance, related to education quality, facilities, enrollment. I think it really is important to align that under a unified set of priorities so that we can stay focused and organized in making that work through the finish line.
Thank you. I'm not. Would you be able to dig a little bit deeper into what potential policy suggestions you may have for next year, even just one or two, like for specific legislation or specific policies that we have in place?
So I think what I've been pretty consistent on in my approach that I think is really important and I want to honor is that we really need to do this in a way that is engaging the community, is allowing me to spend more time in analyzing the data. In every role that I played, I've been very data driven, and I think it might be a little out of turn right now, given I'm only a week in the role to give you some concrete policy recommendations. I will come to you certainly when I've had that opportunity to really do a deeper dive. And I think in the next 100 days to really do that deep work of listening, learning in the community, analyzing the data, evaluating the existing policies or new recommendations so that I can be effective in really providing you with more robust policy recommendation that could be effective.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
So we've heard a lot about problems with mental health in our schools. And I've also had constituents come to me and complain because they were, they were hired to deal with those problems, and then they were let go because of funding. What kind of a priority do you see that as, to get these people that they can deal with mental health problems in our schools?
As I mentioned, that has come out as the key theme in my conversations I've had this week, is that there are growing mental health needs for our students. So I come to you with a lot of experience around supporting students that have experienced trauma. And I think it's really important that we think about how to do that well here in Vermont. I can share examples. Just recently, we had a student that committed suicide at a high school campus. And I was able to mobilize a number of mental health support resources for the entire student body and the community. Didn't stop there, but thought about, how do we now move to conversations around prevention and building connectivity between our schools and our healthcare providers. I had a similar experience, unfortunately, where the students experienced a homicide and they were bringing that trauma to school. And many of the kids were getting in trouble at school and were being suspended. And I learned about it through one of our trusted community partners on the ground who called me and said, we have to figure out a way to manage this, because now that the kids are getting suspended, there's more risk of them being in unsafe situations. So I was able to effectively bring together the police department, the school district, mental health providers to address that immediate need. And we were able to talk to the principals and say, were you aware that these students had witnessed this horrific event? They had not been aware. Once they were aware, they were able to provide the support that the students needed. So after we were able to address the immediate concerns with those students, we came back around as a team and we said, how do we prevent this from happening in the future? So we were able then to move into a space where we could actually share data in our community. We have what's called Shot Spotter, which actually keeps data where a gun shot goes off everywhere in our community. And that information is helpful for our school principals to know and be aware of. And then figuring out how we actually have memorandums of understanding with the community health providers that can be ready to support and respond and provide individual counseling for those students. So I bring a lot of experience in managing very complex mental health challenges that are both unique and individual to students and are part of a larger and complex community challenge. I really want to understand how to be of support in addressing the mental health challenges that I'm hearing about in
Thanks, sir. So a moment ago, you were mentioning that you're hoping that you'd have celebrations a year from now on achievements and what have you. But I'm going to expand the scope just a little bit further. My constituents really want to know if the governor gave you a mission for this job, and if you and the governor share a vision of where you think Vermont's public education system might be 5 to 10 years from now. So a little beyond the 1 year perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like the longer term vision. I appreciate the question. So I mentioned in my opening remarks what really inspired me about this role was the opportunity to support the state of Vermont in creating this continuum from early childhood education all the way to career. My research training and my work as a practitioner have been around creating that system of cradle to career support. Research indicates that that is a very powerful way to address the social determinants, economic determinants of academic success, and can really be a game changer in terms of creating opportunities not only for individuals, but to promote broader economic prosperity for an entire community. And that's a vision that really inspires me. And I bring experience in, articulating that vision and helping to intentionally design systems that include, creating shared alignment, policy alignment, data sharing, process and training support for us to do that in a way that is going to be effective and yield the desired outcomes. So often we see kids are entering kindergarten and they're not ready for kindergarten based on the screen. That really sets them up for challenges within their academic career early on. So I believe very strongly in the importance of early investment. I'm very proud of the state of Vermont for having universal preschool. That's a wonderful thing. And I bring experience in trying to connect all of the different systems that support children with keeping public K-12 as the strong foundation of that, and then integrating the different systems of support that children navigate throughout their career. And so through that, we're able to do that. We're seeing students enter kindergarten ready to learn. We're seeing higher rates of proficiency in reading in third grade, high graduation rates. And we're seeing after college that our students are matriculating to college or going right into a technical training that's going to get them set up for a great and meaningful career. So we can measure all of that along the continuum, and I'm really excited for that work because I think it's very transformative for a state to take that on that level.
Thank you.
Along those lines, you mentioned career technical education is a priority for the governors. I think it's safe to say it's a priority for this committee. And most Vermonters, and most Americans are now sort of rethinking career technical education. And for everybody. So it's the student that is, I think, on the college university path and the student who isn't. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience with career technical education in Florida.
I believe in giving children early exposure to different career pathways. I'm really proud of Vermont for including the personalized learning pathways in the 7th grade so that students start to have that exploration around how their talents and skills and interests might fit into a career. I often hear from students that they shouldn't know another job pathway was available, right? So I believe it's very important for us to give that, diversified exposure to careers. I've had experience in doing that, early on in middle school and through job fairs and things like that as early as elementary school, and then very in a focused way by developing training programs. So the work that I did in aviation was bringing together our technical college, our K-12 system, state college in Broward County, and aeronautical partners. First, identify what is the workforce shortage that really needs to drive the training programs, because we need to make sure that there are jobs available. And then identifying the training expertise available to develop the program. And we brought in those partners to support with the internship component so that students had hands-on learning experiences. From the time we had our first meeting until we enrolled students, it was 6 months. And it was fully enrolled program that continues to be sustained and is helping to address critical shortage around aviation mechanics. Similar as we look at jobs within the public works sector. As you know, the state of Vermont recently dealt with a large scale flood. So did the city of Fort Lauderdale. We're continuing to address a lot of those challenges with climate change. So there's different needs in terms of the workforce and helping us to improve our infrastructure to promote resiliency. So with that effort, I was able to also work in partnership with the U.S. Department of Labor through their Good Jobs, Great Cities Academy to develop a program to support a talent pipeline for those jobs that are in high demand. Here in Vermont, I know that the Vermont Futures Project has estimated that there's a workforce shortage of 10,000 workers. I'm interested in working more closely with that group and being able to understand where we see with specific industries where that is, so we can be intentional about working within our K-12 system to develop those pathways that are helping students to prepare for careers. That I'd love to see them have opportunities, in high school, to intern or be pre-apprentices, so they can get those opportunities to learn, about those, careers.
Thank you. Senator.
Thank you, Chair Campion. Follow up on Senator Weeks's question, and then I have another one. His question about vision, I would say Vermont is desperately in need of an incredible leader with an incredible vision. I heard you use words like continuum and alignment. I didn't hear a vision. Can you give me one or two examples of the vision, not the continuum or the alignment, but the vision that you would bring to Vermont for education?
Yeah, so what I was sharing was really the methodology that we can really transform our educational delivery in a way that's going to get us to those excellent quality indicators, right? So really being able, as a state, to be the leader in terms of indicators like kindergarten readiness, literacy in third grade, graduation rate, and then matriculation into college or into a career. I think those are vitally important. Something else I'm hearing about Vermont is really bringing students back to our state. So if they leave the state for a job or to pursue higher education, what are some ways in which we can really entice those students to come back to Vermont and be part of the economy here? And I think that needs to also be part of that broader vision.
Thank you. And then my question, if I can find it, yeah, so affordability, something that the governor talks about a lot, and he talks about affordability a lot in the context of education. I guess I want to ask, what would you do about the affordability crisis that we have in our state? I have been an educator, and I personally don't see a lot of fat in the system. I had to use my own money to sometimes pay for college application fees for my students and supplies, classroom supplies. So given that schism we have between this narrative about affordability and then the fact that our system doesn't really seem to be all that fat, how do you envision the financial future of our education system? I know it's a hard question, but
It's a big one. Thank you for everything you did to support students out of your own
Yeah.
pocket. I know that a lot of people do that. And I think that's part of educators just wanting to do the best for our students. I think affordability is a challenge for education nationally. We're seeing that there are greater needs for students. We saw that before the pandemic, and I think a lot of those issues were further exacerbated. Now we're facing, the sunsetting of federal dollars with no longer having access to ESSER funds. And so I think across the country, there's a lot of conversation around how do we continue to sustain the additional support that we provided for students with less funding. And Vermont is grappling with that as well. Certainly there is an affordability challenge in that we're looking at, very large increase in property taxes. So understanding, how to address that, I think really takes much more analytical and review of the structure, right? And how we fund education, how we structure ourselves to deliver educational opportunities and equity across the state. I'm coming from a state, Florida, that really is probably one of the lowest reimbursement investment in students, about 8,000 per student. Coming to Vermont, which is one of the higher spenders, right? And so I think that's a really great place to start because it's showing that we do have a very high investment in education and that we believe in the importance of funding our education system. And I think the work that we need to do as we talk about this visioning is to really think about from a student perspective, how are we aligning those resources in a way that's giving every student equitable opportunities? I had a conversation with some students that went through the merger. They were in White River Valley. They were very articulate about describing the fact that when they were in fifth grade and there's this conversation around merging schools, they had a lot of trepidation. They had a lot of concerns. They weren't really wanting to join with a rival community school and those type of things. But now that they're in high school, they talked about the fact they have more opportunities and they're grateful that they have more programming opportunities, broader course selection, more electives, more athletic programs. And so I think those are conversations we have to have that are centered around how are we best, maximizing our limited resources to promote equitable educational opportunities for students. So I think it's part of a broader conversation that I think needs to be part of that visioning.
It's a hard conversation. We talk about it a lot. There are some incredible small schools in our state. I always mention, I'm sure the committee's tired of me mentioning, my cousins went to Craftsbury Academy, beautiful little school in the Northeast Kingdom, 100 students, K through 12. But the opportunities weren't there for all students. Now, if you're a middle or upper middle class family, it's very different. But for low income Vermonters, it's really challenging. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate your early thoughts on a vision. I know it's not a sexy topic. I say it all the time. Literacy is huge. Senator Hewlett's been working on it. The committee's been working on it. Prior committee's been working on it. But if we can get all third graders to be reading at grade level, my gosh, that would be an incredible achievement. So.
I did talk a lot about numeracy, but I would also look at that too. And as we think about preparing students for future careers in AI, you would really have to be thinking about that too in education, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities in these future careers that we need to be preparing them for to be successful.
Thank you. Senator Sheen.
Thank you. I think you had mentioned local control much earlier on, and I just wanted to kind of revisit that topic about governance structures and supervisory unions and just the way we have that system set up. It's almost as complicated as our education finance system. And I know I have at least 3 constituents watching who local control is very, very important to them. So I was wondering what your thoughts are, potential future vision, and acknowledging that it's still early on, but future vision about what the governance structures for school districts and SUs would look like.
Great. So one, I'll start with the fact that I believe strongly in local control. Right? I shared examples when I was at a municipality within a large school district in advocating for schools that had been underserved in our community. And I think when you're in a very large system, some of those unique needs may be overlooked. And so I believe strongly that it's important to have community engaged, being able to amplify the voice of the community and the priorities for education. So I believe very strongly in that. As part of my orientation to Vermont, I've tried to visit different types of governance models. So I've been able to visit some of the supervisory unions that are largest geographically and some that are single districts, right? So I would say I'm still learning about how that structure works. But I think that there are ways for us to be able to be effective with our governance and really be able to bring in that local control. I have to learn a little bit more about what it is before you're making those type of recommendations.
Thank you.
So we have you mentioned after school programs. And we recently found out and passed a bill on this committee that significant amount of money was available for after school programs. But it was decided that because of the way it was financed, it couldn't go through the LEAs, couldn't go through the districts. So it's gone to the nonprofits that are doing the after school programs right now, but I believe ALE is still responsible for managing that money. So there's a disconnect. I think that after school programs are important to matriculate into K through 12. And how would you connect that?
Yeah. So I'm aware that the after school funding is through a mixed delivery system. So that can either be through the school as the LEA or through a nonprofit. And so I actually have a lot of really concrete experience in this area. So working at the Parks and Recreation program, we were able to develop programming, and we worked with the school district to really align curriculum and assessments to make sure that we had that continuity. So I think there's very clear ways to create that synergy. I think there's good ways to be able to create that cooperation, as I shared earlier, where figuring out how we can, analyze who has the bandwidth to do the work and how do we leverage the expertise of different partners. So I've had a lot of success in developing cooperative agreements between the school district and the nonprofit partners in ways that create that academic continuity. I think it's really important that we have the opportunity to work with students after school and in the summer, that we're able to bring in some education enrichment to further their academics.
I may never get reelected again, but
Okay.
but after my the soon to be 18-year-olds hear me say this, but I am always intrigued by year-round school. And I really am. Can we expand those kinds of opportunities for kids? We know there's learning loss, but there's also the whole social emotional piece that some kids, listen, as a gay kid growing up, if I'd been sort of forced into some sort of social kind of environment, I think that could have been good if it were, does that make sense? If it were sort of, hey, everybody's going to this, or everybody's going to that, instead of, I think sometimes back in the day, kids kind of isolated themselves and weren't as social. So I am interested. I'm wondering if Florida has done anything, not on the, I'm not looking specifically on LGBTQ stuff, but just in terms of the social emotional health of kids during the summer.
Right. So I haven't experienced that in Florida with year-round school, and I would be very unpopular to suggest something to my kids. But I've done a lot of work in trying to bridge that gap, right? Because access to summer school can be a challenge. So I think that's a conversation around, how do we make sure that we're having that continuity of learning through those critical summer months. There are other models in different parts of the country that do year-round learning. It's certainly a different financial model that would also need to be considered. And they typically have large breaks that are built in, throughout the year. But I think with the existing resources that we have, there's opportunities again to create that alignment with the summer enrichment programming for students and making sure that there is that access to summer enrichment, because a lot of camps can be quite expensive. Right.
Great point.
And
Absolutely.
so I think the issue of access is how I would approach that conversation, and thinking about the way we can leverage the funds we have to really target the needs of the students who most benefit.
Senator Weeks.
I just had a question. So I'm still trying to understand you from your resume and obviously what you're saying here, but in your last position as the Chief Strategy Officer in Broward County Public Schools, you used the phrase reimagining district operations as one of the bullets of your accomplishments. So what strategy were you working on in that effort, and does it apply to Vermont?
Yes. So I'll paint a little bit of a picture to give you a context at Broward County to help you understand the nature of the work. So I mentioned the scale of the district. It serves over 200,000 students. It's also very geographically diverse with over 31 municipalities. So the complexity in terms of engagement with the local municipalities is also quite complex. We were seeing decreasing enrollment in many areas of the county. Yet in other areas of the county, we were seeing that there were over enrollment and students on a waiting list for certain specialized programs. We also saw that there were facility needs that were not uniformly distributed across the district, and maybe in the higher needs communities, they had more facility needs. And that ties to a lot of the resource issues around the enrollment. We also saw that there were not consistent outcomes across the district, right? So all of these things really prompted us to evaluate how we organize ourselves differently in a way, again, to ensure that we're maximizing the limited resources we have to drive academic opportunities for students. So what that looks like is, for example, if you have a program that is really successful, so Cambridge is a program that many of our students really value, the pre-law programs, things like that. So an opportunity to add those programs in other parts of the county so that more students can participate in them, and you can reduce the transportation cost to get there, right? So those are the types of intentional things we were looking at around how do we ensure that we're providing equitable access to those programs that really are going to best meet students' interest and prepare them, for their prepare them for success in their K-12 system, but also thereafter. We also were looking at ways that as a district, we could provide better support overall, right? So improved training for our principals, better customer service with our community, doing a better job of communicating to the public about the great things that were happening in our schools. So it was a very comprehensive approach that we engaged members of the community in helping to define. Let's all define what the challenges are together, and from there, how do we establish those goals of what we want to do different? And really putting that around the lens of what are the possibilities? If we're able to, make different decisions, does that provide greater opportunities for students? And that was really important that I was engaged in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say thank you for what you just said about making sure the good stories get out, because sometimes it seems as though, with all due respect to the folks in the room, it's the bad stories that get taken up by the media, and it's nice to
You guys take it.
celebrate the successes. So thank you for bringing that up. I do have, a lot of my constituents are very concerned about the really hurtful education policies that come out of Florida. There are many books have been banned. The two laws, let's see, HB 1557, which was the Don't Say Gay bill, and then there was a Don't Say They bill, HB 1069, which really focused on the use of pronouns in schools. I'm wondering, in your time, I know it was a short time at the Broward County schools, but also when you were working in Fort Lauderdale, for example, did you do anything to kind of either push back against these laws that really hurt kids? Or were you able to implement any policies that push back against those? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. So I think really what you're speaking to is there's some conversation. Florida has been in the news a lot around the culture wars, right? And I bring none of that to Vermont. The county that I was in is very unique in being very progressive and very supportive of ensuring equity and inclusion in teaching our whole district. So with our commission, when many of those laws were being passed, I was working with our mayor and commissioners to doing the research and engaging with the state around questions that we had around those implications as they get into the schools. In terms of concrete work, is I just building off of what I was doing with Broward County Public Schools is for redefining the district. I mentioned several times that there was inequity in terms of facility conditions and outcomes. And when we started having these community conversations, many residents from our high minority communities were coming to these conversations very concerned that their communities were going to be disproportionately impacted by these reimagining efforts. And in my work, it was really important that I was able to articulate and to clarify that we need to bring racial equity into the conversation. And actually look at our history of where changes had been made. And so I'm proud that through my efforts and working with our teams, we put together a very comprehensive data report that actually looked at, for the first time, where our historically African American schools were located, and began to have conversations around the impact of integration when students were bused to other communities. And then looked at those schools that continue to exist that we call legacy schools, and evaluating the level of investment that we made in them. And so we had a lot of conversations around the importance of investing in those communities and recognizing that they have been underserved. And so I know a lot of the policy and the conversation has been really theoretical around diversity and equity and inclusion. The work on the ground that I've been involved with is making sure that we are focused on our full history and that we are very nuanced in understanding that in bringing into decision-making processes. And that's relates to support for our LGBTQIA plus community. I'm really proud to have worked with our first openly gay mayor for the city of Fort Lauderdale, who was a big champion of LGBTQIA plus community and rights and students. And so I come to you with that that work that we were doing.
Sanders, do you need a break at all?
I have a lot of stamina.
Okay, wonderful to hear. Okay, but if you do need a break at any point, please
I'm
let us know. Senator Hashim? No, you're good. Okay.
What's our time for?
I've cleared the 8:50.
Oh,
Okay.
So I think really
I might need coffee.
until the committee is finished with its questioning, if I may, I just want to shift a little bit to kind of back. You've talked a lot about pulling down monies through grants, other different ways. But frankly, that's quite appealing. We have massive school construction needs ahead of us. We have a lot of other needs ahead of us. We're a small state and we have limited resources. I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on some of those times when you were able to access funds for particular projects. And frankly, I am very interested if any of them did go to school construction.
Yeah, the school construction funds were actually out of, we're not a grant,
Okay.
that was actually out of the funding for the school district from reserve funds that they were able to allocate. Something that I'm really interested in as I come into this role in the state of Vermont is thinking about how we can work with the federal government to draw down additional dollars, and working in a supportive way with our supervisory union districts to ensure that we are maximizing the dollars that we are receiving. And so I have a lot of experience in developing those grant utilization reports, so that we're keeping tabs on how much money we're drawing down, so that if we see that we're at risk of having to return funds, we can be proactive and allocate those. So I would say a first focus is making sure that we're maximizing the existing dollars and resources that we have. And then I do think there's an opportunity as we think about defining our vision for the state of Vermont for education. We're very unique. And I think if we can articulate a very clear vision and a clear strategy, it will afford us new opportunities to pursue those federal dollars and also private funding dollars. And I'm really interested in understanding how do we really strengthen education for all Americans? What does that look like to achieve those high quality results? So that's how I would approach it. But I think really it's first, practically speaking, what data sources, what grant sources do we currently have? Are we fully maximizing that? And then being able to explore what additional resources might be able to draw down. I would say additionally that it's very helpful to work with the business community. And I've had success in being able to form those strategic partnerships with businesses as it relates to sometimes sharing equipment or resources, sometimes teaching expertise, and also hosting student interns. So that's another area where we can bring in additional support.
Thank you. Senator Keel.
Thank you, Chair. Currently the legal counsel for the Agency of Ed lives out of state, quite far actually. Do you think it's best practice for the state of Vermont to have the Agency of Education legal counsel living out of state? And will you allow AOE employees to live out of state when you, now that you're in charge?
Mm-hmm. So I won't speak on specific personnel matters, but I'll speak just broadly around how I'm looking to really build and organize the team. I see that the agency having a really important outward facing role and supporting with technical assistance, training in the field. So I'm looking to determine how to balance that in a way to optimize productivity. And so far, just in the first week, I've worked to mobilize a team, cross-functional team of AOE staff to be able to support a supervisory union right now that has some staffing challenges, and we're working very closely with that superintendent to be of support and be in the field. So I do think that's an important element as we're helping to promote continuous improvement.
And weeks.
So I took note of your master's thesis, which was reframing how practitioners think about human service delivery. The theses are often derived from personal or professional interests. And I'm wondering, what question were you researching there? And is there any application to that effort to?
At the core of my research was how do we develop the capacity to collaborate? And that goes back to, I think, what I bring as a strength in terms of breaking down silos, bringing people around the table to work cooperatively together to achieve goals. In my experience, when you talk about collaboration, when you first come together, people are excited. There's a lot of optimism, a lot of energy, but it takes a lot of tactical work in order to define roles and responsibilities, to create a clear cadence of accountability and communication. And that's a lot of what I studied that I think will be valuable in this role as we're really trying to figure out how we optimize all resources and expertise to support educational options for us.
Thank you.
We have a real teacher shortage in the state. I feel like teacher education is changing a lot, and so there are, I think, some opportunities with that shortage. In other words, give people an opportunity to try out teaching through getting credentialed in a different way, and see if it were to work for them. And I guess my question is twofold. First, have you been seeing the teacher shortage in Florida? And if so, what sort of things have been used to address it? And then secondly, have you had an opportunity to reflect on on teacher education programs at all? We are close in Vermont looking for the best and the brightest, and people who want to be here and are excited to be here in the classroom. And research shows if you want to be in that classroom every day, that is number one. Despite students' personal struggles, that can reduce a lot of security, decreases the negative impact, being hungry, mental health issues, all those kinds of things. So I guess, again, teacher shortage in Florida, have you all sort of been addressing or looking at in any particularly interesting way? And then secondly, teacher education programs at all, if you've had an opportunity to reflect and review what's happening either in Florida or across the United States.
So I was actually meeting with the agency staff this week and asking this same question around how are we helping to recruit more teachers to our state. So I understand that there are some alternative pathways that are being created here, and that there is continuing to be some increased utilization of that. So I think that's a positive direction. I know the state of Florida launched recently a teacher apprenticeship program, and I believe the Department of Labor is doing that as well as a pilot here in the state of Vermont. I live in the north, correct? Oh, UHS, okay. Is doing that. I think that's a promising practice to look at and understand how that can help to really attract more people in the field. And then overall, I do think we need to be thoughtful around some of the other barriers to attracting teachers in terms of housing affordability.
Right.
I was talking with the superintendent just yesterday who was recruiting a teacher and was really excited about that teacher coming on board, and they couldn't find housing. And I was really impressed that the superintendent went out of her way of really engaging the community, calling the realtors and asking to figure out places where this teacher could live, right? So I know that type of work is happening, but systemically, there's some work that we'll need to evaluate there to consider that there is affordable and attainable housing for teachers to be able to move here to the state. Additionally, in terms of other areas that we will currently working with UVM, maybe some other universities too, to promote and increase that talent pipeline. So I'm excited to get a little bit better understanding of what that looks like to see how we can continue to expand that.
And we've had this conversation a little bit in committee, and just something to think about. I don't need your thoughts on it, but are there opportunities during CTE programs to put students to try out teaching? I mean, are there high school students that might have an opportunity to go and apprentice and try it out? We want people, sometimes in the olden days, I think it's changed, those teacher education programs really, you weren't in the classroom until later. And so the theory and the academic background stuff was really intriguing, but then you realize later maybe it wasn't for you. But to get people in early, and that's what excites them. They're going to know that, hey, I'm going to move in this direction. So just, again, something to think about.
Yeah.
Because I think it's CTs have sort of closed off to education a little bit.
Yeah, I have some experience in Florida with the urban teaching program that is a pathway that students can pursue in high school. And then they're able to actually teach, at the childcare centers that are adjacent or other centers that are adjacent to their schools, which can be quite helpful. So, yeah, I think we need to look at a diverse range of options to kind of get people excited about the field of education.
Senator Doolittle.
Thank you, Chair. 36 of our state education secretaries or commissioners in the US are former educators. 11 have had some sort of bolstering public education. 3 haven't worked in education. You'll be the only one to have worked for a for-profit charter school management company. With that in mind, how do you imagine yourself building trust within the AOE? And a follow-up in terms of the AOE is I think we're the only state in the country that had Title I dollars withheld because of non-compliance. And I think we've struggled with generally student supports and special education policy and law. And so I'm wondering how you're going to build systems within the AOE. So I guess my question is about building trust and building systems within the AOE.
Just a clarification, were you talking about our federal secretaries of education?
Yes.
They've all had, because I went through and they've all had teaching experience.
No, 36.
Of how many?
Oh, well, 50 and 51 you the District of Columbia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about our national federal secretaries of education, like the Obama administration.
Right,
Okay,
statewide.
yeah, 'cause I think I
Statewide.
don't think they have
Right, no, state.
much, education experience.
So I'm going to respectfully push back on the fact that your assumption that I don't have public school experience. So I have devoted my entire career as public education, and I do have, experience with curriculum development and teaching in higher education. But my focus is really on exactly what you're asking: is how am I going to build that system of coordination and support? I bring that experience in a very unique and I think extensive way. That others may not have. Having worked in multiple states and complex educational systems and creating this integrated system of support is going to be really critical. I've worked in a cross-functional way in every point of my career, and I find that it's really easy to build trust when you're able to bring people together around that shared vision and building upon their strengths and their interests. I'm already seeing at the AOE a lot of excitement around working more closely together and being very collaborative. Really, I think in that effort, you begin to recognize individual strengths and their talents. And that in and of itself creates a really positive energy and excitement. In terms of building trust in the field, it's the same as building trust anywhere. It's being able to be present, to listen, and to show that I'm learning about what's important to them. And not just learning, but figuring out how to follow through on those priorities that are going to be most important to them. So I intend to be a very hands-on Secretary of Education with open lines of communication and to ask a lot of questions so that I can do my job better.
Somewhat along those lines, I appreciate the data-driven nature, your interest in data. I usually do have a list the University of Vermont gave me of those schools that, based on test scores, which again aren't everything, but are really struggling. And my interest really is for you as the secretary and the agency in general to be thinking about more of a hands-on approach with those schools. Really being able to come back to this committee, it's hard sometimes to talk publicly about schools that are struggling. And I reckon we don't want to, but there's still ways to get in there, do the work and come back and say that the work is being done. If hospitals were misdiagnosing people, it would be all over the news and the papers, and we would be working to address that. And we're not looking to, these are complicated issues, but certainly the more the agency can get into our schools, I think the better. And I don't know historically if they have been, but it doesn't feel right now that they're, again, that they're in there as much as they need to be. And I'm happy to be proven wrong. I've always thought it would be amazing. Back to Senator Gulick's question a little bit, yes, I do have share the concerns with certain members of the agents, of any agency being remote. But if we have, staff from the agency throughout the state, so somebody could get a phone call and say, hey, can you come in and work with us on this? I think that would help speak a lot. I really do.
And I think I can't speak to, the level of engagement that the AOE has had, in the field, right? I know that we do have, a continuous improvement team that is working and supporting those schools. And, we met this week and I'm excited to go with them on an upcoming visit so that I can understand a little bit more, about that work. But, part of what I need to do too as a new leader in this role is not to get too hot or cold on anything right away, right? I need to understand the perspective of the field. I need to understand the perspective of the agency so that I can really work effectively in ensuring that we are structured as an agency as a way to deliver on our core compliance requirements, and also spending the federal dollars, and also to addressing the needs of the field. And so through this process, that's really why I'm structuring my onboarding and this twofold approach, which is spending a lot of time in the field, spending a lot of time in the agency, so that I can help to create that alignment. And I think ultimately what we're all looking for is to make sure that we have a coherent system of support for education, and really clarifying roles and responsibilities of the various stakeholder groups that are involved in education. There is so much involvement in education across our state, and I think that's a really powerful thing. And I'm looking forward to meeting with all the different associations and stakeholder groups to understand, the expertise that they provide, the training that they provide, and understand what is the role of the AOE and helping to support that work. So I'm excited about that, but I really believe it's important to stay as connected as possible to the field, because it's going to help us to do our work better.
Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Chair. Getting back to the beginning of our discussion today, which was around charter schools. And you've reiterated a few times that charter schools are public schools. Then we asked the question, how do they differ? And you said governance structure, I believe, and a kind of lottery system for entrance. Do teachers have to be certified in?
Yes.
They do. The same certification.
Yes. And similar, if there is a out of field waiver would apply for our school teacher and a public school teacher, and they would have to follow the same requirements. There's an approval if they're out of field that the board is required to make.
Okay, but they're not governed by like an elected body, like here in Vermont, we have school boards where people are elected.
It depends. It depends on how it's structured. So some public charter schools, their teachers are part of the union, and some they are not. It depends on how it's structured.
Senator Weeks.
No, I did not.
Oh, you did not have.
Thank you.
Just a softball question. So I had an email last night from a constituent who said that, I don't know where he got his data, that the student to teacher ratio in Vermont was 4.3 to 1. So we have a certain capacity within the state of Vermont through the Vermont State Education, Vermont State University system and the University of Vermont to create our own teachers, but we need teachers now. So would you take a look at how far out we can? It's going to take 6 years to get a teacher qualified in Vermont. In the meantime, we need to bring teachers in from the outside. It's just like anything else. The contractors, we can't get up. We don't have, when they get here, we don't have a place for them to stay. So what would your plan be, part of your vision to create from within?
Right. So I think the agency is doing some of that already, and I was meeting with staff to understand the different pathways that teachers can become certified, both by transferring their certification to state, having some of the alternative pathways to getting certified, and also the apprenticeship program that I know is going to be piloted here in the state. So I think some of that is underway, and I think part of what I need to do first is analyze the utilization of those programs, so that I can make recommendations on what else may be helpful as we pursue that real challenge of the teacher shortage.
Can I correct my colleagues, Donna?
Absolutely. And I
No, I said it
10 to 1.
it was anecdotal.
Yeah, 10 to 1 based
And
on.
that was in my either's email, so I.
Yeah, I just don't want anybody
Okay.
4 to 1's
Pretty-
shocking.
Senator Jameson. I'm good, yeah. Great. Senator Field, please.
Sure, I hadn't written this one down, but it just came to me because I had a conversation over the weekend with a friend who works with refugees in Vermont, and we have some refugee resettlement towns. According to folks who work closely with new arrivals to Vermont, they lack linguistic support, mental health support, transportation, food, housing, I mean, just a whole host of issues. A lot of times they come with trauma, they've been in, in areas that are extremely dangerous and they've had some horrific experiences. What would you do, or what could you do, I suppose, in your role in the AOE to support our refugees, our new Vermonters here in the state of Vermont?
Yeah. So first, I have some questions around what type of support is available. When I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, that was also a place where a lot of refugees were resettled. And in that context, Catholic Charities was very involved in helping to provide that type of support. Are they a similar organization operating in Vermont that is providing that connectivity?
Yes, my sense is there are some really great nonprofits that are very helpful initially, but then over time, they can't give the supports that are necessary. And I don't know if that's because of workforce, they lack the workforce, or if it's financial, but these are the anecdotes that I hear
Right.
often, is it just doesn't, it's not enough and it's not enough time.
Right, and it's probably falling on the school, right, to be a support. So I think in that scenario, it's really being able to spend time in your part of the state to understand those issues and to work with the schools that are supporting our refugee students to identify how we can provide an even more comprehensive case management and what resources are available to do so. So I look forward to spending more time so I can understand those issues and think about how to navigate them, and also ask questions around the nonprofit organizations that are currently providing services to understand if they are aware of the gap, right? So sometimes they might provide services and do and feel like that transition has been smooth. It might be helpful to have that debrief with them to identify where there are continued needs, so that we can work in a way to address those. But I'm glad you brought that up as an issue that I need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's an important one.
Secretary Sanders, do you have any questions for us?
Um,
No pressure. I mean, but I want to make sure the committee's also answered all their questions, but I thought I would just shift for a moment to you to see if there's anything outstanding at this point. You've been on the road, you've started to see the Vermont educational landscape. Anything right now?
So I think, the question that I shared, I've asked with everyone, I'd like to ask the committee, right, as we think about a year from now, or maybe even 10 years from now, what will we be celebrating together?
My retirement from the legislature.
Related to education.
Yes, Committee thoughts?
I have 1,000 thoughts,
Yeah.
but it's not my confirmation here. So
Okay.
I'm not gonna go there. It's, some of us got assigned to the committee without a lot of, professional education background, as far as educators. And we certainly have visions. And we're, as freshmen, we're working towards, except the chair, of course, we're working towards kind of coalescing what those visions really mean and how they affect your agency specifically. So I'm gonna back the chair.
For me, those essential skills, going back to literacy, are everything. Being able to read and write and being excited about it, being able to do it, reach those skills at a grade so that you're not catching up always. And the other piece, I mean, I would agree with Senator Weeks. There are a lot of things we could talk about, but the social and emotional health of our students right now is, I know, at the forefront of all of our minds. How can we keep students engaged and excited about learning, which will translate to so many wonderful things. So those are a couple of things for me there. Anybody else want to add anything?
I mean, I tend to agree with Senator Weeks that we have a lot of ideas and visions. We were both on the school construction task force, so we have a lot to say about
Construction.
school construction and, but I guess I just feel, I mean, I said it before, we need an incredible leader with incredible vision. The AOE, I feel, I think it's safe to say is struggling right now. They're loaded with incredible people. There's incredible talent in that agency. We know many of the folks who work there. But it just feels as though they've lacked that cohesive leadership. So that's really what I would want to see a year from now, 2 years from now, is that they are the best that they can be because of a leader that's brought them together.
I can say I'm very excited to work with the agency staff. It's been really a fun part of this past week is just really being able to engage with them. And there's so much enthusiasm for the work that they do. And, they got to this role at the state level because they care so deeply, right? And they really want to be part of this broader conversation around what is the vision for education. And I think too, this is the opportunity to talk about roles and responsibilities, right? So that everyone's clear and that we're all rowing in the same direction. So I'm excited to lead the agency and work with a talented group of people that I think are really excited about the work.
Yeah, I'll mention it's kind of a tie between two things. I mean, first, Senator Campion mentioned the social and emotional health of our kids. But in terms of the agency and the legislature, I mean, for me, clear, consistent, and reliable communication is really the most important, especially after this last session. I just really want to be able to have straightforward conversations so that we can develop good policy.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
I guess I hope that's something that we can celebrate that year.
Yeah.
To get to your question.
We'll bring cookies.
Committee, other questions you might have? Senator Weeks, so you're good. Senator Saunders, thank you very much for being with us. We really appreciate it. We know if you have any follow-up questions, where we might find you. But we very much appreciate you being here today. So
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.